right, lovely Ludwig Van. We're on Halitics this morning at 11 East Coast time. So happy to welcome back Mike Hersh. And Mike, you were on just a couple days ago, but we had a lot of audio challenges, and I'm optimistic, hope springs eternal, that we've resolved them, perhaps with the aid of AI, artificial intelligence, big in the news, a lot of stories. So we're going to get right into it with Mike Hersh, National Communications Director, Progressive Democrats of America. Mike, tell us why AI is important to you, why you're the right person for me to be talking to right now about this topic, and how, just sort of a little bit of a background before we delve deeper into what some computer scientists have been saying that's making the news.
Thank you, Hal. It's always great to speak with you. I find you a very thoughtful, insightful, well-informed, and intelligent person. And I really appreciate the opportunity to
Oh,
have this
go on.
conversation.
Just go on and on and on. No, Mike, listen, the flattery's great, but let's get what's. I mean, is this an existential threat? We're in the sixth grade extinction already. How much worse can we humans screw things up?
That's a very good question. And the answer is that every powerful tool has the ability to do powerfully good things and powerfully bad things. And unfortunately, the most powerful people on the planet seem to be generally pretty negative overall in terms of uh, destroying the climate, risking war, hoarding resources, exploiting weaker people. The Supreme Court infamously said that money is speech, and as long as that's true in the United States, money is dominating our politics. And extremely wealthy people are driving a lot of decisions in their favor. And you wonder, Ted Kennedy, not a poor person by any means, once said on the Senate floor, how much is enough? And he really lost his temper and started yelling at the right wingers who were facilitating the hoarding of money and resources. And that was probably about a generation ago. It's only gotten worse. So, what is AI? That's a very important question. I think that the media tend to conflate things. They try to both terrify people about things that maybe don't matter that much and downplay things that are very threatening. And part of that is public relations and the conflation of different concepts. The AI covers a lot of different things, and we've already talked about how there are a lot of science fiction and horror stories about AI getting control over the human race and us being dominated by robots and computers. And that I think is a separate issue. I think the main issue is that AI as a souped up data processing tool gives dictators and corporations and people who want to dominate and control human beings another tool to do that. And so it is very serious in that regard, just as a means of surveillance, as a means of compiling data and information to control and manipulate people. And it is a real concern.
Well, what you've just outlined, especially the potential for a tyrant or a plutocrat to capture this technology, this artificial intelligence, and use it to aggrandize themselves, is what a lot of other experts are talking about, whether in academia or coming out of the tech industry. How can Maybe you can give us a scenario, and I'll get into the interview with Jeffrey Hinton in a moment. But a scenario where you could see, a malefactor, whether it's a titan of industry, a political, a dictator, or a very powerful president using artificial intelligence to seize almost complete control.
Well, that's a very very good question. I think we all know the truism that knowledge is power. And if I have a lot of knowledge about you, I have power over you. If I know things that you like to do, things that you're afraid of, things that you want to do, I can manipulate you both subtly and also in a way of bullying you. And I think perhaps the more dangerous uh, thing is the subtle control and manipulation that you're not even aware that you're being manipulated. And you'll find that when, it's almost eerily the tendency that a lot of us have experienced, where you can even be discussing, I've never been to Bermuda. I'd like to go to Bermuda. And then you log on to Facebook or some other social media and you see ads for vacations in Bermuda. It's that's a pretty blatant example, but we're being exploited economically in a subtle way, through cookies and also through this uncanny surveillance where your phone is spying on you all the time. There's also, if you use Google Maps to get around, Google will use that to create a profile of you and use that to sell things to you. But the question is, what else are they doing with that information? And again, information is power. If I have information about you, I have power over you. And nearly every, if not every, free app that you use, if you're not paying for the product, then you are a product that they are selling to somebody else. And that, in and of itself, is threatening to our privacy, which unfortunately is so deeply eroded now. But it's also a means to control and a means to manipulate you, to get you to vote for a certain person or get you to support a certain policy, often against your best interests, because they can manipulate you through fear, anxiety, anger, and that's how
Emotion rather than logic. Well, we
exactly.
got Mike Hersh with us on Halitics. Please please subscribe so we can continue to bring you great programming like this. And we'll get right back into the conversation about artificial intelligence. One thing I was thinking about, Mike, and I was telling Shade, who's kind of my tech advisor, and he's been super helpful getting the audio. I think it's a lot better. Been really pleased with the last program anyway. And anything that's good, that it sounds good, looks good, he gets all the credit. Any problems, you know just whom to blame. You're looking at the bottom of your screen right now, bottom left. And one thing I was thinking, and I told Jade, I love doing the live streaming with the video because we can have the visual aids. You can see it right there with Hinton, and we got a lot more clips. We'll get to, but the thing I liked about radio, I didn't really have to worry about my appearance. I could just roll out of bed and it didn't really matter. And you can tell I really doll myself up for these things. I comb my hair and I shave and, oh wait, no, that's a different script I've got to follow. All right, let's get into it here. The things you were talking about, existential threat. Everything you just said, that's what we've seen already. I mean, is this anything different from the way the Nazis used radio? I mean, Goebbels was one of the original, very early on saw the potential for using radio to control the masses and blasting out, Hitler's voice. And, it motivated people to do exactly what wasn't in their best interest. TV has been doing this for 70 years. I mean, we're fatter and lazier and slower because of all the ads for, foods that are bad for us. So it doesn't sound like this is anything really sui generis. It's just kind of a logical next step.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Uh, the the fascism arose hand in hand with radio as a very effective means of public relations and propagandizing people. Television increased that power by marrying the audio to the video, where compelling images were able to distract people. And I would point to Ronald Reagan and his public relations team as incredible experts at manipulating people through visuals, through television. And that team went on to work with Fox News. We, recently lost, or they settled a lawsuit in which they were forced to basically admit that they were lying to people um, under oath and in depositions. And that's the harm of that. Now, the internet is also the next step, as you said, in manipulation. And the power of the internet, is it can carefully personalize and tailor its propaganda to you as a person. And they know more about you than you think you know that they know. And in some ways, the AI and the precursors to AI know more about people than they do about themselves, because they use big data and pattern recognition in order to figure out, based on your actions, your purchasing actions, where you travel, the things you buy, and the things that you put in your email, the things that you say in the presence of your phone. They are able to stockpile all this information about you and narrowcast directly to you in a message carefully calculated to elicit the emotional reaction from you, to feed you messages that manipulate you, that are carefully customized and drafted particularly to you. And they don't even necessarily need to do very much except for throw everything that they know about you into a profile. Compare that to people who have done other things that they want them to do, and feed you stimuli that will cause you to react in the ways they want you to react. So this is in some ways a qualitative, but mainly a quantitative difference in the amount of information, because now it's two-way. Now it's not just like television where they're pouring things out to you, or radio where they're pouring things out to you and knowing that the mass of people will generally react a certain way. Now they're able to surgically tailor this to you in ways that might, they could send me a message that might force you to do the opposite, but they send me a message knowing that I'm going to react favorably, even though if they sent you that message, you might react negatively. And they'll send you a message that will entice you to do a certain behavior that would turn me off. But they know enough about you, they know enough about me, they know enough about millions and millions of people, or even billions of people around the globe, to manipulate us on almost a one-on basis. And that's what AI empowers: manipulative, controlling, domineering, and exploitative entities, and malefactors, as you put it, whether they're oligarchs or governments that work for oligarchs, or despotic regimes, or so-called democratic republic regimes that are basically dominated and cater to the very powerful among us. So that's where we're coming down to. And then you also have the overlap of internet tech companies becoming part of the manipulative media empire. And we were hoping that the internet would democratize media, because anybody could put up a blog. You're doing this independent. You're not answerable to, a $1 billion corporation like MSNBC or something like that. You're able to tell the truth. The problem is that so many people are equally empowered to put out manipulative and countervailing messages. And the more power and the more money and the bigger platform they have, the more powerful they are. And AI just further empowers them to manipulate and control people.
Well, you can see on the screen there, I did share with you for a while there. You weren't seeing the slides, Mike, but I addressed that issue, that the AI does aggregate information very, very, very rapidly. That's what it's good at. It's not as intuitive,
Yep.
clearly, but they
Yep.
have algorithms that can target me with certain messages that they can tell from what websites I visit with the cookies, et cetera, that are most
Yep.
likely to appeal to me. And if you and I are somewhat similar, but we have differences too, and they're very good at addressing those little nuances. all that said, are we overstating this? I mean, one of the big, the fear mongering from the, I don't even want to say the left, the fear mongering from the corporate center, maybe, if I want to use that term, I don't know what the right term is, about Trump was we had all been manipulated somehow by the Russians, by these Russian bots to support Trump against our own interests. And it turns out there was very little, if any, of that. And to the extent there might have been, it probably had no impact or virtually no impact. I mean, aren't people a little bit smarter than that? I'm more concerned not so much about targeted messages necessarily, but just about big media in general consistently blasting the same message to all of us over and over and over again. It's so hard to cut through that, whether it's the idea that Putin is an existential threat on a par with a Hitler, or again, that Trump is illegitimate because of these Russian bots. That seems to permeate the national consciousness on the one side of the aisle, and on the other side, a completely different message. So it isn't so much artificial intelligence, just good old-fashioned repetition over big lies that are told over and over again.
Well, I find it interesting that there's a huge gulf between what the mainstream media has actually reported about Russian involvement in U.S. elections versus what the mainstream media specifies as facts. And what the mainstream media has presented, the fact that there's negligible or no impact from the Facebook ads and various other things, that a lot of that activity was just, clickbait. And some of those clickbait farms were in Russia, some of them were elsewhere, but there's no appreciable impact, in terms of why Trump won. One is Hillary Clinton ran a dismal campaign, campaigning on what she wouldn't do and what she was going to take away from people and attacking voters. And I've never seen a successful politician ever attack the voters. It makes no sense. Then strategically, she also did not devote time or resources in certain swing states because she was trying to win states like Iowa that she was never going to win. So she was either badly advised or didn't listen to good advice. I do know that people in Iowa were telling her she wasn't going to win Iowa. She had to focus on Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and she refused to do so. And lastly, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote overwhelmingly by millions of votes. So basically, we need to get rid of the slave era anachronistic electoral college, which is designed to empower the worst elements of the American system, and those are pretty bad. So, absent the electoral college, we wouldn't have had George W. Bush the first time. We wouldn't have had Trump. And so, I don't know why Hillary Clinton and other people are running around blaming Putin when it's the electoral college and in Hillary's case, a terrible campaign that allowed Trump to win, even though he lost the popular vote. But in terms of manipulation, I think that the manipulation does cause people to buy things that they don't need, to eat things that are bad for them, to support policies that are bad for them, and to kind of fall in love with phony, dishonest politicians, Democrat, Republican. I guess even some independents are big phonies as well. And rather than address the issues, the existential issues, like why in a nation this wealthy don't we have Medicare for all, housing for all, jobs for all, education for all? Why do we have people in medical debt and bankruptcy in the United States when we don't have that in any other, industrialized nation? And in order to maintain this okey doke, this flim flam, this bipartisan ripoff that's going on, the best way that the powers that be have found is to get us fighting each other over things that don't really matter to us, sideshow issues, distractions, because if we all got together and demanded what we deserve, we would get it. But if they can keep us at each other's throats over relatively minor issues. And I'm not saying that none of these issues are important, but they're a hell of a lot less important than tens of thousands of Americans dying needlessly because we don't have Medicare for all. Every year, tens of thousands, up to 70,000, according to some studies, are dying simply because we don't have a policy that would actually save us hundreds of billions of dollars every year. But rather than talking about that, we have, presidents, House speakers, Senate majority leaders arguing about, whether trans girls should be on, their middle school soccer team. And I know that's very important to some people, but is it more important than people dying because they can't get health care? I don't think it is. Is it as important as people dying because they don't have a home? Because we have a housing crisis in this country that's literally killing people and degrading the quality of life for people. And as long as they have us focusing on divisive issues, we won't come together as poor, working class, middle class Americans who are increasingly being crushed by a system that's designed to aggrandize the already powerful and to afflict the afflicted. And we need systemic change. We don't need to argue about a lot of little things. And to bring this back to AI is a very valuable tool to find out what pisses you off or pisses me off and get us angry with each other and arguing with each other rather than coming together as brothers and sisters, whether somebody voted for Trump or whether somebody voted for a third party or whether somebody voted for Biden. None of us are getting what we need from the system.
So the fighting, the fighting that I find so upsetting is when groups, let me put it this way, when there's intra-class warfare, where there's fighting within a group of people whose economic interests are very similar and very different than those of the elites. That's what I find most frustrating. And it seems just as hard, Mike, to me, to get self-described progressives to get that as it is to get people on the right to understand that. And just that Hillary Clinton deplorable statement, so many people on the left actually applaud it. Well, she just said what you probably shouldn't say, right? What maybe she, it was a gaffe because it's the truth, but it offended people. No, you're not really morally superior to someone just because, they live in Lansing, Michigan, or because you're not morally superior to them because you voted for Hillary Clinton and they voted for Donald Trump. There's a million different reasons that people make political decisions. And Hillary Clinton is not morally superior to, is not clearly in any way a morally superior individual. So to get people to put aside that disdain and contempt they have for those who have different political views and unite on shared economic interests seems extremely hard on both sides of the aisle. And I don't have solutions. This is exactly what we talked about with Anna Callahan yesterday. So I urge people, if they missed that that conversation, which was great, just like this one is, please do check it out. I don't want to just completely disregard, and I appreciate what you said about AI, is that it's just another way to pit us against each other. I do want to play this clip from Jeff from BBC News. I showed a lot of clips during the conversation that Hinton was talking about, which is exactly what you were saying. So there was no real reason to interrupt. Better to have the conversation than to do more than show the clips. But let's play this video here because I think it's pretty interesting.
More than 1,000 tech leaders called for a 6-month moratorium on the development of new AI systems because of what they said was the tech posing a profound risk to society and humanity. I mean, is it too late?
It may well be. I think we have to adopt some spirit of optimism and recognize that we do have a huge degree of human intelligence as well. And now more than ever, we need to summon that. And one thing that Jeffrey Hinton does emphasize is that digital intelligence, the kind espoused by these chatbots, is very different to human intelligence. And that may present an opportunity for us to tap into our own human strengths and understand how we can behave and cooperate with one another in ways that might allow us to regulate these technologies and rein them in. But I will say, Geoffrey Hinton has been working on these technologies for several decades. There are many within the space that have been issuing these warnings for several years. So his own warning does seem to be coming quite late in the day. And there is a sense that maybe the genie's out of the bottle now, and there's no real accounting for what happens next.
All right. That was very interesting, Mike. That wasn't Hinton, because we've heard a lot or seen a lot of what Hinton has to say. And this was his response. That was a scientist from England. I think the name is, if I got it wrong, I apologize, Junaid Nahin. Junaid Nahin. And I was really intrigued when he said, well, it does seem a little late because he's been doing this for, he's 75 years old. He's been working for Google all this time. And to me, that's, again, the experts can't really be trusted, right? It's like we're glad he brought it out now, but maybe you could have done it before you got rich and old, manipulating all of us or developing the technology that allows for it.
The question is it better late than never, or is it just too late? And that was the question that he was trying to address, is it too late? Have you and people like you already done so much that we can't reverse it? And that's a very frightening question, and it applies to climate and applies to a bunch of other things. I think that it's very important to stress what he said, that digital intelligence, and what he was talking about is, and what is intelligence? And on the kind of the dry run that we did the other day, we got into whether it matters if some kind of machine intelligence or some kind of digital intelligence is, cracking the whip over everybody, or if it's just a human being using the digital intelligence as a tool to do that. And it becomes maybe more frightening if we said, that it's a machine doing it, and the answer to staving off a tyranny of machines is human intelligence. But the question is it better to be dominated and exploited and controlled by human intelligence or digital intelligence? I mean, it might be qualitatively worth to be dominated by digital intelligence, but it isn't a picnic to be dominated by human intelligence either. So, we have to look at domination, tyranny, exploitation, denial of basic human necessities, the kind of extortion that our current system applies to control people. So there's no good exploitation, there's no good tyranny, there's no good domination and coercion and control.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm going to just jump in there for a second. You can see we're going to get to this next article, which I give the New York Times a lot of credit. I'm very critical of it, and I try, Mike, to not, even with Fox, and I think lately they've become a slightly less ugly outlet. At least they were until they fired Tucker Carlson, in my opinion. But I try to, be critical of the media that I consume. And this is something that frustrates me again, is this overt rank partisanship. If you're for the other guy, then you're bad. And it's the same with media. It's people all they'll do is attack and criticize the media that other people consume, which is often, the criticism are often completely right. I mean, they're spot on. I mean, the climate denialism is particularly pernicious, in my opinion. That comes from the right-wing media. But there are many other examples. I think a lot of racism is barely coded on the right. So I'm not going to defend it. What I'm going to say is, if you live in a glass house, don't throw stones out of the house. If you're consuming the New York Times, if you're consuming the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, especially those latter two, there's so much wrong with the media that they're with the information that they're providing, and it's designed to manipulate you and anger you and turn you against the Fox News watcher. So don't be so quick to attack other media and other people and people who consume that media without looking very closely at what you consume. And I really try to walk that walk, Mike. I really do. I mean, I'm, as you know, I'm more critical of my side, maybe to too great a degree, because that's my personality. But I'm just saying, if we want to make friends and influence people, we have to be willing to be truly empathic and see what they have to say, and be willing to try to understand, and not just condemnatory or condescending, like, oh, well, you know, I understand them. They're controlled by the reptilian brain. You know, that's not a way for us to unite with those that we need to if we're going to make a difference. So this question that the New York Times Magazine, again, so I want to give them some credit because I'm often very critical. And, you know, again, the credit at least for the New York Times and Washington Post is if I read a fact, something that's presented as a fact, it might not be a fact, but they're more reliable. They're pretty reliable when it comes to stating that something happened at a certain time, at a certain place. I'm inclined to believe them unless it clearly benefits their advertisers or their economic ideology for me to believe what they're saying. So the question is, this is exactly what you asked, how do we ensure an AI future that allows for human thriving? And this is Gary Marcus from NYU. And I think it's pretty interesting what he says. I think we both agreed that one thing we have to do is create a society where there aren't massive wealth and income inequality, A, and B, there just aren't people who are just impoverished, that we don't have people sleeping under bridges or begging in the streets. That's the first thing. And I think that goes with that is, you know, not just that everybody has enough, but nobody has too much. Nobody has too much to control others, so much that they can control others. I mean, and people will say, like, there was this guy, Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, Republican senator, saying, what is rich? And, you know, I'm going to say, okay, there are areas where we can bleed, right? Like, we can argue, we can debate it, but, you know, nobody needs at most, I'm willing to say, let's just say it's between 2 and 3 houses. You have more than 3 houses, you have too much. Maybe if you have more than 2 houses, you have too much. You have more than 1 car per individual driver in your family, you probably have too much. You know, I'm willing, certainly if you have a company, you need a pickup truck, I get it. We can debate it. When you start having 4 or 5 cars for yourself, probably have too much. So we can have a debate. We can have a discussion about what is enough. $100 billion is too much. $1 billion is too much. Is 100 million? I'm starting to think that's where we're getting into an area where, yeah, maybe it is. So we can have this debate. We can have this discussion. But when someone has 1,000 times more than $100 million, they have too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also kind of approach it in a little bit of a different perspective. I think that in order for a society to be called a civilized society, nobody should be without the basic human necessities to survive and thrive. And as long as we taxed the wealthy and corporations enough to provide healthcare, housing, nutrition, education, transportation, childcare, elder care, there are a bunch of other things that are absolutely essential for a human being to live a healthy, satisfying life. And unless and until we provide all of these things for everyone, we're not a civilized society. And if we're not a civilized society, we're not, you know, we're some kind of a barbaric society. And to maintain a barbarous, sadistic, exploitative system, just in order to, deregulate extractive industries and other industries that are spewing poisons and toxins into the environment, to allow people to market harmful products or deny people
or, you know, employ people at wages that are below what allows you to even pay for an apartment because
right.
they don't have any alternative. That is not a
Exactly.
civilized society. So let's just, and
Exactly.
we'll get into that. We have about 20 minutes or so more, and I want to talk about politics, but I want to stick with AI. I know we keep morphing, and they're closely connected because, as you pointed out, the artificial intelligence, the fear is it's used to keep, again, divide people who should be economic allies. And Gary Marcus is the professor from NYU here. He says, um, or the question is, do the benefits outweigh the costs? And he answers that no, we don't know. And he seems to agree that it's less easy for people to articulate specific potential benefits. So that's the question. What benefits could there be? Now, I asked you, is Siri, like you said, Siri, don't, turn off my ringer. So when I'm on the call, no, the phone doesn't ring. So is that artificial intelligence, and is that a benefit that's so great that we should be like, okay, this is good, let's have it?
Well, I think Siri lacks any initiative, and Siri lacks the capacity to exploit and manipulate people as Siri. However, Siri could be gathering information that the Apple Corporation could be using to sell to other companies to control, manipulate, and exploit people. So it's a little of both. And yes, there is a convenience benefit. But if we're giving up our freedom, our volition, and our economic well-being for convenience, it's similar to what Ben Franklin said, something like, people who give away their freedom for security don't deserve either and won't have either. If we give up our volition, our economic independence, and economic freedom, which is based 100% on our ability to procure for ourselves the basic human needs, if we give up those things for convenience, we're going to end up without convenience and without economic volition and economic freedom to live our lives free from coercion and anxiety and control of powerful oligarchs and the entities that they control.
So it's interesting because Marcus struggles to come up with like a specific benefit from artificial intelligence. Just as you said, yeah, so it makes life a little easier in certain ways. But he just says some of us likes to slow it down because we are seeing more costs. I don't think that means there are no benefits. He adds, but he has trouble articulating one. He says it's useful for programmers, right? And we just talked about how it can also be used by gathering that information that Apple could go beyond simply, even where we are now, we're targeting an ad for you. Maybe there's some app or something that helps, you control your audio on your phone a little better. You're somebody who seems to use, want to change the volume a lot. Maybe there's something there that they could sell you. Beyond that, right? And I don't know what it would be based on that particular request, but probably those geniuses could figure it out. He does say that there's the fear of China, which is interesting. But again, what would they use it that to benefit us? So again, it seems like what we really need to do is just compress society, compress the wealth and income inequalities to a tremendous degree, so people don't have the ability to corrupt society, to pervert government, or living and nobody's again living in the streets. Nobody's hungry. Nobody has goes without healthcare. Doesn't get education. I mean, I think we can agree on this stuff, and yet it's so hard to achieve. And if the newest technology is co-opted by a small group of elites, they're going to just make it that much harder. That's the fear, right, Mike? I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've heard the argument that if we don't do this terrible thing, then China will. I mean, that to me, that's a wholly unpersuasive argument. Um, it's never justification to say, well, if I don't screw you over, then Hal might. I mean, in either case, you're getting screwed over. And if that's the best argument that you have to do something that you can't demonstrate will benefit somebody, And it's the argument that we ran into when we were trying to convince the members of Congress not to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And we ultimately were able to delay it and hold it up. And Trump put the final nail in that coffin. And Obama and went down fighting for it, even though we persuaded a lot of members of Congress that it was a horrible idea. It was a union busting, environmental destroying, local government overruling, consumer protection reversing scam. And the best argument they had is if we don't make the rules, China will make the rules. But we were able to overcome that argument in this case. China is a nation of about 1 billion people. They've got a lot of problems of their own. They're coping with some of their problems like housing and poverty and other things in a more directed way, I think, than the United States is in some instances. And I would never apologize for a despotic regime like China. I think that there are wholesale human rights abuses. Their environmental protections are terrible. But to me, the argument is let's be better than them. Let's not join them in a race to the bottom and then, use them as a boogeyman, as an excuse for having a race to the bottom. And so, saying, well, we have to empower oligarchs in this country because otherwise oligarchs in another country are going to do something. I mean, can we disempower oligarchs and free people instead? I mean, let's do something good rather than make excuses for doing something bad.
I think that's a really good point. I agree with that. I'm very critical of China. I think China is a much greater threat to freedom, to security than Russia is. I think that Trump was correct when he said that, when he argued that. I think, some of Trump's policies clearly worked out. I mean, he was right, and when we've abandoned them, such as trying to create a better relationship with Russia, it's worked out very badly for us. So, I'm just not going to sit here and say, Trump did a lot of bad things. I'm not going to defend Trump exactly, but I'm going to defend some of his policies. I think what you said about China is very comparable. China does a lot of really bad things. China's environmental policies are very destructive. They're clearly they're less free in China. Not that we're also free here, but they're less free there for sure. Their expansion, their territorial expansion is scary. Their desire to influence other countries is scary, but that's true for us as well. I mean, sometimes there's little to choose between us. So let's try to figure out where there's areas where China maybe does things a little better than we do in terms of probably distributing healthcare and maybe ensuring some kind of economic justice, maybe, although there's a terrible amount of poverty there too. And I've never been, so I can't really speak to that. Here's what Shade has to say. From what you are saying, so this is just to moving on to something else. But again, I'm saying let's try not to condemn other societies. It's, to the extent we can, or certainly not individuals. From what you are saying, AI should be able to predict and prevent most mass shootings, but that doesn't happen. I think there's been some areas where the police have been able to intercept shooters, and maybe this is a bigger issue. Maybe this relates more to just our insane gun laws, which basically don't exist. But I understand police do make use of a lot of technology to reduce crimes. Maybe things would be even worse without whatever AI they're using, if they're using any at all.
That hadn't occurred to me. I'm glad you brought that up. I do know that law enforcement uses human profilers, and I think profiling retrospectively is very important in terms of tracking down a dangerous criminal. Why would the person do this, and what can we expect them to do? What tendencies are they going to have? And I think that's valuable because I think once somebody's demonstrated violent tendencies, we need to get them off the streets if they've opened fire on in a Walmart or a country music concert or a school or whatever. I think that we all basically agree, even the most ardent gun rights supporters oppose that. The question is, could AI be predictive in terms of like a red flag law, where there are some jurisdictions that have red flag laws to try to ascertain whether somebody's a threat? And AI would have the capability to scan social media to find, posts on social media threatening. I've had enough with blah blah blah. I'm going to kill all the the blah blah blahs. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. A lot of times, people are just spouting off steam, and you would have to
right. I mean,
sure
that gets to be scary, right? Then that gets the big brother point where you just are on a fishing expedition and you can find thousands of fish, and one of them is a shark. But and I'm sorry if people don't like that kind of analogy, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It may be at some point you have to say, is it worth it? Is it worth putting, having government have that kind of oversight with the potential to reduce a massacre? And are there better ways, right? It may work, but are there better ways to prevent massacres? And certainly I think,
yes, exactly.
gun control, sane gun laws.
So let's,
but let me just, go ahead, Mike. Okay, I'm sorry. You're my guest. You should get to speak. I should talk over you. I just am trying to move things along, and I'm filibustering even worse. But yes, go ahead.
I know, but I think what you're raising is, are there ways to red flag misuses of red flag mechanisms? Is there a way to check on the checkers to control these things? And I think what it comes down to is that it has to be applied judiciously, not overzealously. But I do think that AI might be able to deal with one specific situation, and that's when you need information really, really quickly to make an instantaneous decision. Like, for example, there's the trans woman who's a representative in Montana, and she got up and gave a speech that I guess made the people feel guilty, so they moved to kick her off the floor and kick her out of her office and yada yada. And when this became celebrated, some people did what's called swatting, which is to communicate a false emergency message to law enforcement saying that there's a violent crime taking place at their home, and sending a SWAT team out there who then breaks down the door brandishing very powerful weapons, and they're on hair triggers. And this has happened a lot, where innocent people have been implicated and harmed and shot because of this very dangerous and destructive thing. Law enforcement has to react instantaneously when somebody says there's a violent crime being committed. So what AI could do is gather the information, find out where the source is of the tip. If it's coming from like 3,000 miles away from some kid, they can maybe discount that, or they can find out if the address is like a place where a drug deal could be going wrong, or if it's somebody's suburban residence where, the worst thing that could happen is, they run out of the kind of Chardonnay they want to use or something.
All right, that's really interesting stuff, Mike. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we have been doing a lot of back and forth into the political realm here. So the question I asked with Anna yesterday, why can't we pass the policies we need? You and I have been discussing this because of the power of a small group with wealth, tremendous wealth that's corrupted our politics and often become the the actual leaders, whether it's Trump, a multi-billionaire, although it's unclear really how rich he is, or Berlusconi, one of the richest men in Italy, becoming, buying the presidency there, or Putin perhaps now using his power to become the richest person in Russia. So it's a true fascism, where it's the intermarriage of wealth and power together. And this is occurring at every level in the United States, state, local, and federal. But, and this is what we're talking about with Anna, how do we address that? How do we unite poor, struggling, working people? How do we keep Democrats, who really may be an AOC or a Bernie, who's really, independent, but caucusing with the Democrats? How do we keep them solidly with both feet in the progressive camp rather than, becoming co-opted by the powers that be, the belt becoming part of the beast that they're in whose belly they're residing? I have a question for you. Are we seeing something good in Maryland? Because I was skeptical. I'm sure you were of Governor Moore. Here are some headlines from, I guess, our go-to source, maybe for Maryland politics. This is just a screenshot from Maryland Matters today. This is from Maryland Matters today. And I like to highlight. I'm big with the yellow because I always loved highlighters when I was a kid, and I was so sloppy. I couldn't get them nice and neat. And I look at other kids' pages, and like the yellow was perfect, or the pink, because you always use yellow or pink. I use yellow, not pink. Mainly, it's not a preference for yellow exactly, but I find that yellow highlights better with my GIMP program than pink. Pink kind of makes it's not as obvious. It doesn't stand out as well. So that's why I use yellow generally. Every now and then I use pink. So look at these headlines. The governor, this is just today. It's not like I cherry picked. It wasn't like I went back and I looked. I just saw these and they kind of stood out at me from Maryland Matters, which is really just a Just the Facts Ma'am website. That's from, by the way, for those who are wondering, that's from Dragnet. You're probably too young to know that. All right, so these are the laws. Bills that prevent fraudulent sign language interpreters. This is to help deaf and hard of hearing people from being exploited by phony sign language people. Maryland has now legalized recreational use of marijuana, which I think is very positive. Personally, that's a big one for me. And also, Maryland is a safe haven for, we're Marylanders, Mike and I, so we're talking about the state we know. Maryland, a safe haven for abortion access and protections for trans health care. So are we seeing the government we want? Is this evidence, or how strong? Maybe it is evidence. How powerful is this evidence that maybe we are able to have transformative change on a state level here in Maryland?
I think that we might share this attribute that we remain hopeful as well as skeptical. And we're occasionally pleasantly surprised when not cherry picked right in a row at all are common sense. And the only criticism you could have is it should have been done a long time ago. But Governor Moore is hitting, he's got a triple there, 3 for 3.
All right, we're having a little bit of audio transmission difficulties, Mike. This is, I'm going to say, completely out of my control. There was a little bit of a hiccup with the internet, and I blame Verizon for that. So I'm not going to admit we just lost, but we're back now. These are good policy steps. I wish the legislature had gone a lot farther. There are a lot of areas where the legislature and the governor didn't go far enough. There is a $15 minimum wage acceleration, which is good, and yet it's not indexed to inflation, which to the governor's credit, he saw it, and that would have been a much better result. I was not a supporter of Governor Moore. I supported former Secretary of Education John King. I thought he was by far the most progressive. Governor Moore ran an opaque campaign. Let's put it that way. We just didn't know where he stood. He just didn't want to be pinned down. I didn't like that. He's surprised me to a degree. All that said, and I think these are very good. I don't have a problem with any of these. I mean, the sign language, I'm not minimizing the importance of that to people who are hard of hearing. I don't know how important it is on the broader scheme of things in terms of making life better for millions of people. And likewise, I won't say anything, the trans healthcare is a good thing. That's a good thing. I really want to say that's a despised minority that does need protection. So that is a good thing. But is to a large degree here, what we're seeing again is identity politics. I don't always oppose identity politics by any means. I think we should address the specific challenges that discrete groups face. but it isn't what I want, which is, again, class warfare, where I want a focus on raising the floor and lowering the ceiling. And we're not getting that. And even with the medical cannabis, which is great, and it's going to, it's really a good thing in a lot of ways, but we're not, as far as I can see, democratizing the distribution. The governor himself owns a lot of shares in a cannabis company, which he is putting in a blind trust, so that's good, but it's in a blind trust after he legalizes it, and the price of the stock presumably will go up as a direct result of this legislation. So in the end, unless we do exactly what I believe we have to do, which is make things good for poor struggling working people, and reduce the undue power and influence that the rich have, these are not going to lead to a better Maryland for all, and they may backfire. People who are, working really hard and don't get health care at work may be pissed off. They're like, why are those gay people, why are those trans people getting health care? And I'm not. Pot's legal. I like to smoke pot after work, but it's more expensive now than it was before it was legal for me. So I'm just making that point that I think in the end, these types of solutions, while lovely in the short run and will lead to, good things for people, I'm not persuaded yet that it's a vanguard of a truly better society for those who are not sharing in the benefits of our neoliberal hegemonic economy.
Yeah, I agree, Hal. And I think that regarding deaf people, disabled people in general, trans people, gay people, people of color, these are all populations that have specific needs that are not being met by the system. And I think that you said it very, very well. I think we both support addressing their specific needs so they can live a full, healthy, productive life to the best of their ability. And you and I share the disdain and the abhorrence for people who will use and exploit the suffering of discrete groups and not do a damn thing to help them, but use them to shoot down something like Medicare for all. The most horrendous example of this, and one of the reasons why she lost, was when Hillary Clinton said, Bernie says to break up the big banks, but that's not going to end racism. Well, what a stupid argument. What a stupid, manipulative, right-wing argument. Oh, yeah, well, we could feed everybody, but that's not going to give them all health care. Oh,
it's not going to eliminate racism.
Yeah, we could give everybody health care, but that's not going to help deaf people here. Well, it's, if everybody had health care, maybe there'd be fewer instances of deafness. If we had prenatal care, if we had early detection of things that could cause people, to identify people and save them. But to say that, breaking up her buddies on Wall Street and their chokehold on our economy and our lives isn't going to end racism, it actually might, because those SOBs are redlining and harming people and divesting people of color of opportunity. So she's wrong on that.
She is. And Mike, that's going to do it. I'm going to cut you off. Thank you all for watching Halitics. We'll be back tomorrow. Click like, click subscribe. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you, Hal.